the last 50 years here in the U.S., suburban residential developments have gotten boring. These developments were designed specifically to bring people into the suburbs to have a sense of community with their neighbors, but they didn't do that. These developments have become sterile. The homes are cookie cutter. The land that's built into it is essentially without nature. Flat lands with a lot of concrete sidewalks. It might be easy to get around on a bicycle if you're a kid, but there is no sense of community, there's no sense of nature. Serenbe is different. Serenbe is a development about an hour outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where it's specifically designed to be a biophilic connection with nature. There's a 25-acre organic farm, seasonal Saturday farmers market, thriving CSA program, and even edible landscaping along the paths and sidewalks. Year-round cultural events. It's a place where you can come to enjoy a meal or a weekend or even call home for a lifetime. On today's show, we'll be interviewing Steve Nygren, who is the founder, developer of Serenbe. And he's going to tell us not only about his development, how it got started, where it is today, but where we're going as a society and how we can incorporate this method into developments all over the world. Here's Steve. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to hear about your development. And I know it's been in the works. You've been working at this for, 20 years now, close to 20 years. And please tell us a little bit about the development and the history of it. I mean, this is not your background, right? You didn't start off being a developer.
No, I'm a hospitality guy, and was very fortunate to grow a company that I was able to sell, and retired in '94 at a fairly young age. My kids were young enough, and we retired to our weekend farm on the edge of Atlanta. And then in my seventh year of retirement, I became worried that urban sprawl was going to destroy the rural paradise. And first reaction is to start buying more land. And at 900 acres, I realized I couldn't keep doing that, and that didn't really buy you protection once urban sprawl heads your way. And so it took 2 years to figure out what to do, and organized 500 landowners, and we changed zoning on 40,000 acres to represent the countryside of England, where after World War II, they put in good land laws. And so if you're over there, there's a lot of people living in the hamlets, villages, and towns, but it still feels very country because it's high, dense areas and then with rural in between. And so working with universities, we brought English land law to a property rights southern state. And then I set out to take our land then to show how that development might look. And now, 20 years ago, environmental was not a common word as you hear it today. This was LEED certification was just emerging, and people were not nearly as aware. So we seem to be way out on the edge of a lot of the concepts. A lot of things we were doing weren't really allowed. And so we had to change laws, get exceptions, and move forward. And so we have done that, and now we're one of those places that's kind of everyone's caught up with this, environment, nature forward, chemical free, regenerative agriculture. All of these are things that we've been doing for 20 years. That's now in the mainstream conversation.
It's interesting you say that because I've been at this for 30 years. And so, I mean, I understand what you're saying in that when you start something so long ago and you have at the time all these wild ideas, and people just look at you like you're nuts.
That's right.
And then now, fast forward all these years, and people are now kind of at that same level. And I wouldn't say so. I mean, honestly, there's still very few developments that I know of that are like yours. Yours is very unique and in a multitude of wonderful ways. But it seems interesting that it's kind of, the developers now they make it sound like, oh, we've just been doing this all along. This is just old hat for us, when still they are still barely scratching the surface of what you've been able to accomplish.
That's right. That's right. But it's good to see so many projects are hitting the drawing boards. Our interest level is incredible
Yeah.
with developers and policymakers, universities coming to see what we're up to.
So I was involved in a project many years ago called Prairie Crossing in Northern Illinois.
All right.
And Prairie Crossing was at the time one of the first, if the first one that I knew of, and maybe in the country, of one of these environmental developments.
They were
And
they were the early people. In fact, they were one of the first people. I went and spent a whole 3 days with George and Vicky,
mhm.
uh, and they were introduced through the Rocky Mountain Institute and all. And no, they were my visit with them and seeing what was happening around them. That they weren't affecting change for the area. Everyone else was just doing the same old thing next to them.
Right.
That is when I came back from that trip and said, we're not thinking big enough. We've got to change the zoning in the greater area, or we're going to accelerate the advancement of sprawl versus change it.
Well, and that was Prairie Crossing started about 10 years prior to you. Is that correct?
I don't think that far ahead.
Okay.
What year were you working with them?
Oh my gosh. I want to say late 90s.
Yeah, and so we were there in like 2001.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so Prairie Crossing was unique, but as you say, it was very specific to that area. They did not have plans, but it was just basically a development. They weren't trying to affect change in the industry as a whole, in their surrounding communities, and they weren't looking as far forward as you have. But again, it was also, from what I remember, one of the first to even attempt something like this.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely. I mean, they had they moved all their density to 30%, and
mhm,
so that was a great place. I saw that. They were really some of the early people with bioretention of stormwater before the federal government even totally allowed us to do some of the things that they and we did. They brought the farm in, but they put the farm off in one corner. And
yeah,
so I thought, gee, no need to do that. It's an asset. Let's bring it right up and put the houses around it.
right.
And so we started, and then we were much stronger because I'm a hospitality guy, and our we really brought the commercial in a very strong way.
Well, and
And
that's one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about is the fact that it's not just a subdivision, right? It's not just a bunch of houses. This is a living community. It's and it really is a model for how some developments now are starting in other parts of the country. I was just in a development in Florida recently where it's a lot like that. It's like you have a school or a schools, you have maybe some hotel space and mixed commercial, but the houses built amongst it make it
right.
seem like it's you're building a city.
Well, there's a real difference between a development and placemaking. And I think in development, you're basically building various levels of shelter, and you don't add the commercial until you count housetops. Where if you're a placemaker, you look at people coming in, and you don't depend on the people living there to support your commercial, and that's what we're about.
So, working with contractors, working with suppliers, um, how difficult was it at the start to sort of get buy-in from the building community?
Well, it of course was difficult. People weren't doing that. We were, even people that conceptually went along with us really didn't understand because there weren't that many models. Now, we were very fortunate in Atlanta because we had South Face, which was one of, this predated the Green Build Conference. They were out there, from the early, I guess late 1980s, maybe early
Hmm.
90s,
Yep.
doing really, it was the only big national conference that brought in a lot of these concepts. They started Earthcraft certification. They were ahead of lead and so we were fortunate to have one of the great educators and right here in our backyard to rely on. So that was a huge help.
Yeah, that brings back some memories of early in my career. So that's I haven't heard those words for many years. And there was and I forget the project now what it was called, but Ted Turner's daughter did that large residential home that was to be like a featured healthy home.
Yeah, yeah, Laura Turner
Yeah.
Seidel, and yeah, they called it Eco Mansion, and they still live
Yes.
in that house.
Oh, wonderful. I was happy to be a small part, very, very small part of that project, but it was the first, again, large residential project sort of to showcase what you can do if you put your mind to it. And
That's
so with your project, and I see the plot map behind you, and I've looked at that over the last couple of years, and obviously it's growing.
right.
Uh, are you looking at doing now new phases of the project in different quadrants?
Oh, absolutely. We are constantly. We have we just opened or turned over platted lots in what we call overlook. And we turned that over to builders in I guess October.
Okay.
And so that's an active construction site. We are putting all the infrastructure in for Spella. That's another 380 homes around a 4-acre Victorian park with some limited live works. We have we're going to be breaking ground this year on a 7-acre aging in place campus with all the medical and support systems and restaurants. Also, a 110 room conference hotel. Uh, so we've got a lot going on here.
So are you doing weekly events, daily events?
Constant, let's say.
Okay.
It's, when I realized that I was going to be a developer,
Mhm.
and we understood the first of all the importance of developing a relationship with nature rather than imposing our plans on the earth, which was one of the big things. And this is we brought in Phil Tabb, who did his doctorate on the English village system, and we also became a trained sacred geometrist, which is
Oh
really
yeah.
understanding the energies of our earth. And so when we started, I told all of our civil engineers and contractors that I wanted to pretend we didn't have a bulldozer. And of course, they saw things that were impossible, and I just would put them in the car and go to the various little towns around us that were built 100 years ago and said, look at, you can put a house below grade, you can build on a hill. And all these things that we wanted to do existed 100 years ago in the way we developed community. But then I realized that in addition to the plans of connecting with nature and footpaths and we have a pedestrian grid rather than a vehicular grid. Our streets wander, but we have a very simple pedestrian grid. That there were four key components that really made great places through decades and centuries. And one is arts, which you referred to. If you look at great places, there was an art patron or a church or someone really supporting artists, and arts programming. And so, looking at how we could replicate that today, we put in a 1% transfer fee for every house sold or resold, 3% if it's a vacant lot. And we're putting well over $1 million every year into art programming. Now, this is open to anyone to come. As I say, we're placemakers, and so anyone's invited. So we have music, theater, visual arts, performing arts, culinary arts. It's just a rich, constant program. We have an art farm where artists are invited into residency. So we have artists living with us 52 weeks a year in various disciplines. So that really enriches the lives of everyone, including the artists.
That's beautiful. And you don't have to, as you said, you have people from outside the community coming in probably to enjoy this as well. If somebody wanted to come and just experience it for a weekend or for a week, you do have lodging available.
That's right. We have the Inn at Serenbe, and so you can check online. We have 5 restaurants, so you can come, for a meal and an event, or for a weekend, or for a lifetime.
Fantastic. Now,
But then, in addition to the art, was the agriculture, which
mm,
Prairie Crossing had the farm. We brought it in close, and a New York reporter did a story on Prairie Crossing and Serenbe, and I believe one others, and she called it an agrihood.
mhm.
Excuse me. And so that sort of has launched that term has stuck.
Sure, I have
It's a
heard
whole
that
movement
before.
for agri-hoods.
Yep, I have heard that before. And that's where it got started. Very good.
Yeah, yeah. But because we were out front, a lot of national organizations started coming to see us and
Mhm.
what we were doing. And I realized they weren't talking to each other. And so about 5 years ago, I had what I called a 24-hour dinner party. And it was for Urban Land Institute and Rodale Institute, the American Farmland Trust, and the Conservation Fund that was getting ready to launch their farm fund. And so we have ended up becoming a sort of a think tank gathering spot. And Rodale has placed their Southeastern Research Center next to us on a neighbor's land. American Farmland Trust uses this as a base and have now staffed Georgia with 4 people from none. And the Conservation Farm Fund started in Georgia. And in fact, tomorrow night, we're having a big announcement on farms that they have saved here that have taken them over the 1,000 acres of farms saved in Georgia. And it allows people who did not think they could own their farm a path to ownership on farms. So we're not only saving farmland, but we're bringing farmers and standing up farmers, which is critical for our future. And now we're working on actually reestablishing a complete agrarian economy. So not just farms and farmers, but also the value add people that come in and take the raw products and value add to take them to market and marketing distributors. One of the critical things is our food chain has become national and international. And if we think the pandemic was bad, wait until there's some scare, and suddenly these distribution centers are interrupted in a major way.
Well, and it has happened. I mean, we've seen that throughout the pandemic. All of a sudden, food distribution plants that were sort of, mysteriously starting to burn down, and I mean, it's just really odd how that happened. I don't want to get into conspiracy theories because that could go on forever. But you're right. I mean, it just shows how vulnerable we are to
That's right.
that.
And we just must start returning to regional food systems and eating seasonal food. It's crazy. And healthy food. We're spending less on food than we ever did, and more on medical treatments than we ever did. So these two have crossed somewhere, and let's understand that relationship.
Exactly. And there's so many commercial farmers or commercial, not even, it's hard to call them farmers anymore. They're just commercial production facilities. And then you get into manufacturing and so forth. Everybody throws out these platitudes of, buy local, small business stays and whatnot. But this truly is the epitome of the way it should be.
That's right. And so much. Have you seen Common Ground, the film now screening?
Yes.
I mean, this shows it's not just the local food, but it's regenerative agriculture and how we treat our soil is critical. And you look back at the Dust Bowl. There's several times where just how we've treated the soils and our farming practices has caused a major problem. And if we're not careful, we're returning to that very thing.
So I want to pivot a little bit. We got a question that came in asking about the rezoning process. How challenging was that process?
Well, it depends on what you call challenging. So we set out about number one, to bring our landowners together. Now, 500 landowners. The inherited landowners were divided. Half were waiting for the bulldozers because that meant payday,
Right.
and the other half loved the area and didn't want it touched. Then we had land speculators who had been picking up land for the previous 20, 30 years. And then there were people like us who had found this rural paradise on the edge of Atlanta. So we were a very divided group, the same groups that battle within most zoning battles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that we had to bring the landowners together, number one. And we started with coffees. We divided the 500 into similar land group ownerships and discussed what the needs were. And so for, the pro-development, it was really pro-value. And to really kind of be able to dissect that. And luckily, the Urban Land Institute had just done a study in 2000 on why we had so many golf courses developed in the 80s and 90s. And it was because the bankers loved the balance sheets. These were expensive lots on golf courses. So the bankers were even pushing developers into building golf courses because then they would fund them because they thought that's what brought the premium. But the study that the Urban Land Institute did showed that the people that bought those expensive lots played golf twice or less a year. So what were they doing? They were buying it for the green space, not to be on a golf course.
That's true.
And so I went to our large landowner groups and pulled them in their group and said, hey, what if we could get the value of a golf course lot without the expense of installing or maintaining it? Now, this wasn't a high development area. This was sort of what was considered the wrong side of Metro Atlanta. This is the Southwest. Development wasn't happening. And so it was like, okay, well, let's go along with this guy. We don't have anything else better. Let's see if it works or not. And then I went to the preservation crowd and I said, at best, we might save 15, 20%. No preservationists are going to help us because they're all in front of the bulldozers in North Atlanta. And what if we could save up to 50%? Would you support development in the area? Oh, yeah. And so through this conversation, we were able to bring people together. And it's, it wasn't just one or two meetings. It was numerous coffees with all these groups. And then we got funding for a public process and we went into public meetings. But we had so invigorated a community to take charge of their own destiny rather than wait for developers to come along or for them to react on what they didn't want, which is what you generally see. And so we formed an organization called the Chattahoochee Hill Country Alliance. It was $2 an acre to belong. And by the time we took it to our local government to change the zoning and the overlay on this entire area, we had 80% of the land paying dues into the organization and participating in the conversation and the planning. The 20% that didn't join us also never opposed us. They just stayed home. Mm. So by the time we took it to our county commission board, they weren't going to vote against us because we had, all of their constituents were supporting for us. And in fact, my county commissioner, when we were starting this, came to me and said, Steve, you're causing all kinds of trouble down here. Please stop. And I said, Commissioner, what do you mean? He said, well, I watched the north end of the county and they had something sounds like similar. And by the time they got to the county commission, there were 200 people with ball caps for and 200 for T-shirts against. Please don't set me up to where I have to vote against half of my constituents. And I said, Commissioner, if you'll give me your complete support and the support of the county planning department, I won't bring it to a vote if we perceive we have more than 30% opposition. And we shook hands, worked together, and of course, we had no opposition. This is one of the fastest, this was one of the largest zoning changes in Metro Atlanta, and it passed in less than 5 minutes.
Wow. Wow, that's fabulous.
So it's a matter of not going in to answer the question more directly with telling people what you want to do. It's bringing everyone that's going to be affected together and having a conversation. And many times we want the same thing. We just use languages that sets us on opposite sides.
Exactly. And so I thank you for that story of working with the municipality, the elected officials, because not only is it tough to work with owners and developers and contractors, but you get people who are on a zoning board that they just don't get it, and the way you were able to bring everybody together and it just made perfect sense, and especially for an area that, as you say, wasn't really hot for development at the time. So it made sense.
So many of these things are common sense, but we're in
Mhm.
such rut thinking we've lost our vision of common sense.
Well, exactly. I like to say that common sense is not very common anymore.
That's for sure.
So a couple of questions have come up about this subject, and I certainly wanted to make this part of the conversation. So I've been working with people with allergies, asthma, chemical sensitivities, multiple chemical sensitivity for decades now. And most of my job today is I spend 7 hours on Zoom calls with people all over the country building healthy homes or remodeling healthy homes, not just green, not just eco-friendly, but truly healthy for the occupants. And so this is where I was on the board of directors of the USGBC for several years, and I actually parted ways with them sort of under protest because the USGBC didn't care about the human occupant. They're more concerned about the outdoor environment. I see that both obviously are important, but we have to focus on the human occupant first. Otherwise, what good is saving the outdoor environment if we're poisoning all the human occupants? So, in your homes, has that been a priority? Is that something that you're making a priority, or you see even room for improvement moving forward?
Well, Andy, you're absolutely right. Lead focused on the four walls of a building. We focus on the entire community. And in fact, we are one of the Earthcraft was early on with community certification, and we were one of the first. So our entire community is certified. The results coming out of every household are incredible. So today we have about 300 children living at Serenbe. There is not one reported case of asthma, which is statistically impossible in the United States today. So we build the houses responsibly, but we also treat the entire landscape responsibly. So I do not allow lawns because to have a beautiful lawn, we end up chemicalizing it. And all these ornamental bushes that have to be chemicalized and grow, and then we with the lawns we're constantly having noise with mowers and blowers, and that disturbs our whole nervous system. And they absorb so much water.
Right.
Sod is one of the real culprits in where we live. Yet, because of a lot of rules on disturbing land, sod is one of the cheapest ways that builders can deal with those regulations to get their certificate of occupancy. So it all deals back to why we have that. And people and we do have lawns on ball fields and such, but they're not the most beautiful lawns because we don't chemicalize them.
Mhm.
What I loved is pre-pandemic, there was a landscape convention in Atlanta, and they did a post trip here. So 2 busloads. I had about 70 landscapers from around the country. I was doing a tour, a bullhorn or mic, I forget what they had. And we were about 30 minutes into the walk, and I said, what do you notice that's really different about our streets? And they started pointing out the granite curbs, the porches pulled close to the street, the custom lights. Not one of them mentioned we didn't have a lawn. And I said, did any of you notice we don't have lawns? And it was just like I'd throw in water. And I said, that's amazing. You are professionals in this industry, and this looks so natural without a lawn. And yet none of you can imagine a landscape without a front lawn.
Mm, that's so telling. It's so telling. And so I I advocate for that myself on just about every building project we do. Just, a xeriscaped property, be one with nature. And it also helps with eliminating a lot of possibility of mold in homes because you're getting any water channeling it away from the house. It's not coming back towards. There's so many benefits to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just endless. How that the outside totally, and at our crosswalks and Grange, we have blueberries at all the crosswalks. Well, having edibles, our farm is not just within the farm. We spread it throughout the whole community in the landscaping. And man, when blueberry season comes, the whole community just lights up and everybody's out and they're picking blueberries and sharing recipes and sharing all kinds of good things that they're making with these. And it's great fun, and it's just a real missed opportunity that we don't do a lot more edible landscapings, especially in our public buildings, our schoolyards, not just a school garden, but why isn't the walkway and the whole front edible landscaping?
Well, exactly, and as you say, it really adds to that sense of community. It's the fact that you know your neighbors, not just by name, but you know them because like you share recipes. You might go out picking blueberries with them. Your kids are walking to school together every morning. It's just there's a lot about that I talk about this quite a bit with my consulting practice that living in a healthy home is not just the four walls of the home and that you're trapped inside of. It's a whole sense, it's a holistic approach to how we live. They're, bringing in having more natural light, more fresh air, the feeling of the outdoors, being able to walk within nature. All of that leads to a healthier home, a healthier lifestyle, and it's just good for the soul.
That's right.
And I mean, there's a type of design called Stapachyaveda, which is a Eastern Indian philosophy of design and placement, like Vastu. And when in Stapachyaveda, there's a rule that says that every corner of every room should bring you bliss, meaning don't build this giant home that you can't afford to actually furnish properly, right? Or you can't afford to hire the cleaning people to clean it. Same thing is true with where you live, the space that you live, not just the home, but where in nature you live, that you should be able to walk outside and look and see something beautiful, and it has an instant positive reaction.
That's right. Well, and a lot of studies are now coming back that beauty, what you see, affects your mental attitude. And we have not really paid attention to architecture and landscaping for the last several decades as we once did. And efficiency has sort of ruled and cost savings.
Mhm.
But it's had a costly effect, I think, on our mental and physical health.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Steve, a couple of questions also came up, and I'm curious to know as well. Have you thought about, or are you thinking about maybe bringing this concept to other locations around the country?
Well, I didn't set out to be a developer. I
Right.
clearly am today. And my goal was to really save my backyard, very selfishly. I decided the world was screwed up. I couldn't do anything about it. So I was going to retreat
Mhm.
and plant my garden, raise my own protein, and
Mhm.
raise my kids. And so, I did that for a few years and realized that you really can't be in isolation if you want to be engaged. I have Atlanta, so I have foreign films, ethnic food, sports, medicine, it's all right there. And so I want that too. And so that's why we sort of put our stake in the ground to do it differently. Now, that said, now that we have really seen that what we're doing works on so many levels, I mean, they're just endless levels what it works. We want to share it. I don't want to go out, and do this. I mean, look at my gray hair and my age. Uh, I don't want to pretend that we're going to be developers around the country. But we now have created Nygren Placemaking. And so that's a consulting group, and we bring our entire teams to work with people. We have also launched Nygren Placemaking. It's a conference we do in the fall. It's 2.5 days. And so anyone that's interested in learning what we've done and how we've done it, and we bring in everyone from our bankers, our civil engineers, our architects, the government, the person who was head of our local government when we changed all this zoning. He comes in from wherever he is and shares how we engaged with the government to get them to come along as a partner in the process rather than this group or town. And so that's a great tool. And then next month, we have the Biophilic Leadership Summit. And so as coming out of everybody thought I was crazy, but then coming out of the recession, there were enough studies that showed that environmental and walkable communities were some of the first to step out of the recession. So suddenly the financial institutions were interested in places like Serenbe. And people would associate us with new urbanism, with agri-hoods, with environmental, and we're in many top 10 lists on all three of those categories, but none describe us, and we're the only one that's in all three. And so we said, hey, how can we explain how we're similar and different? And we realized, biophilic design is really what describes us best. And so it's really relating to all living systems, which is what this is about and what we're doing. And so we formed the Biophilic Institute, and now we do an annual conference in March. And so that's coming up here in just a few weeks. And so these are great policymakers and leaders from all over our universities, planners and cities that come together and discuss the built environment and how responsible biophilic design can be applied.
That's fantastic. I actually know a number of folks up here in Wisconsin that are really promoting and practicing biophilic design, and I think it's on the cusp of becoming the single most popular trend in construction design.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense. And so any of your listeners that want to come, that conference coming up, you can go to the webpage, Biophilic Leadership Conference.
Excellent. And as we wrap up here, Steve, a number of questions have come up regarding available properties. Are there any that are rentable instead of just purchasing? Have you ever thought about developing maybe some smaller, townhome condo type applications where folks who would love to live in that area but just don't need as a larger home?
Come on down. I mean, we have something for everyone. Number one, we encourage, and we made the zoning possible for everybody to have a rental property, the old granny flat. So whether it's in your carriage house, in the basement, in a part of your house, so we really encourage that. So there's places for people that want to rent, employees that maybe can't afford to buy throughout the community. We have a condo building. It started as an apartment that converted to a condo. We have a condo building that's just been released. And so that hasn't started construction yet. They're just releasing the prices. In fact, maybe it hasn't actually been put on the webpage yet. So that's available. We our aging in place campus is going to be, we're really cutting edge on this. There's not going to be age restrictions. You wouldn't necessarily rent there if you didn't need some of the services that are going to be applied. But that's going to be all rental, from apartments to cottages. We have 900 square foot houses up to, what most people would consider mansions. So this is a town, and it's got all those things, and it's available to everybody.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love to hear this. All too often, developments that are built to be a destination development end up with so much restriction that it really makes it difficult for, especially I deal with a lot of folks who've been suffering with chemical sensitivity for so many years that they don't have the resources available that they used to, or even more so, those who are looking to maybe move into a smaller place that's designed for aging in place, and that's becoming a more popular trend. Building a space that has wider doorways and the counters are more accessible for wheelchairs and so forth.
Yeah, universal design, so you can
Mhm.
really adapt to it. Now, our whole goal, stay tuned. Within the next probably 2 months, we have some major announcements, and so we're going to be a disruptor in delivery of medical services. And there's so many rules that just like stormwater and forcing sod. There's so many things we're just doing because we think you have to do it. And we're tackling all these things for more common sense solutions that resembles more how we aged and how we took care of ourselves 80, 100 years ago. And so our goal is we're setting up places to where you can age no matter where you live in Serenbe. There's a campus that emanates all of the services with concierge that navigates. But we have a 23,000 square foot building now that's filled with health providers and 20 live works clustered around it that are independent businesses and people that own these. And it's yoga, it's Pilates, it's weight training, it's diet, it's death doulas, psychiatrists, the traditional medicine, Chinese doctors, the dentist, hearing specialists. A lot of times dementia happens because we lose our hearing and our brain stops functioning. It really isn't dementia. So there are just so many things, and it's all located right here. You don't have to leave. The pediatrician, and we have a school. I have 6 grandkids. They're rarely in a car seat. Because we don't leave campus, and we're in golf carts and scooters, and we have 280 kids in the school here. And it's a private school, Montessori based, but there is a scholarship program that well over 20, almost 25% of the kids are on scholarship. So if you're a farmer in the area, if you're working at Serenbe, your kids can go to school here. So it's a real town we're building.
Wow, that is fantastic. So, um, one thing I have to share is I have family that live in Atlanta, North Atlanta, and I go down usually once a year. So the next time I come down, I am definitely going to be contacting you beforehand so I can meet you in person and then tour the property.
You give me a call, we'll have a coffee and a tour.
I look forward to it. Also, folks, please check out the website. It is just chock full of information, serenbe.com. From that, down at the bottom, because we've talked about a number of things that Steve also does, there is a link to his what's called Nygren placemaking, which is the consultation company for helping people maybe start developing in their area, correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. And then also links to the inn at Serenbe, conferences and retreats. Folks, it is just chock full of information, and I really encourage you to spend some time there. Steve, it has been an absolute pleasure to meet you finally and to speak with you. Thank you for your time. And if there's any parting words to share, the floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate you, the work you're doing and putting a spotlight on Serenbe and other people, because together we have to start changing the way we develop places for people to live and work. Because as we see, this is not sustainable. We can't project from a health standpoint, food system standpoint, almost anything you look at. What my generation has brought about is I'm embarrassed to pass on to the future generations, and we have to change it, and we have a shorter and shorter period of time to do that. And I'll say to everyone, and this is common, that I hear, most people come and say, "Oh, why doesn't your webpage show how this place really is?" And as much as we've tried to capture what's happening here, we realize we can't, because you feel it. And so the visual is only a piece of it. It's to be here and feel it. We have geothermal, and to be in a community where there's no background noise to where you hear birds and children laughing, we've forgotten what that sounds like. To be in a community where everyone's waving at you, that seems strange to people that come, and that's just common sense. So there are these simple little things. How our buildings flow and they don't interrupt, and it blends with nature and the connection of nature. So if you have a chance, come visit us, because you have to feel us, because seeing us is only one dimension of what we're doing.
Thank you, Steve. That was fantastic. Folks, thank you for joining us today. I couldn't have been more excited about having this topic today, and now you see why. You've heard it all from Steve, and I really encourage you all to check out the website, check out the space, please. If you have an ability to go down and visit, please do, because I think all of us who have been in this, I'll call it space, for so many years, whether you're suffering from health issues related to our built environment, or like me, I'm trying to do my part to help these situations. We've all been dreaming of a place like this, and this is certainly the best example that I've ever seen, and I think this is an example that can be used now throughout the country. So everybody have yourself a great rest of the week. Steve, thanks again, and
Thank you,
we'll talk soon.
All right, looking forward to it.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.